your family all supports you now, but if you don't take this seriously and you have to do this a couple more times, I don't know that they're going to be the same level of supportive.
I was in West Palm. I was in St. Paul. I did I felt like I was in band camp, traveling the country trying to find the right community.
And so, yeah, call me enabler, but I would rather see you in a treatment facility than out there using and struggling. So
my aha moment was really
welcome back, everyone, to Ask the Addict. I'm here with Tony, Matt, and we have a special guest tonight, Billy. Thank you so much, Billy, for joining us. And as many of you know, we are here to inspire hope and compassion for all those struggling with an addiction and those supporting a person struggling with addiction. And that really is at the heart of our purpose. And so we're just going to jump in with Billy. And again, let me just say this. One of the reasons why we have guests come on is we really want to create a conversation of Ask the Addict, which provides tools and strategies for families, because we want to, we want families to be a help that helps. And so when we have guests come on, we just want to give, again, a message of hope, how your family navigated through this. And like all of our families, we do things that help and we do things that hurt. And that's how we learn from one another. So go ahead, Billy. Go ahead, introduce yourself and what brings you here with us tonight.
Yeah, so I'm Billy. I am an alcoholic and a drug addict. Been sober since December 1st, 2019. And what brought me here is working in treatment, I get to meet people like Matt who do these types of, chats, which are really beneficial and helpful, obviously, as you said, to families and to how to support. But, my journey was a rough one, getting sober. I wasn't a first time around kind of guy. I tried to get sober. I was forced into it by family at 18. I was a troubled teenager, got into a lot of trouble, legal trouble, family stuff. And I was forced into treatment at 18, and at 19 and at 20 and at 21. And all those times doing it because my family wanted me to. They didn't really give me much of a choice or an option. It was either go live on the street, fend for yourself, or, take this plane ticket, take this, take this. What it was a gift at the time. I just didn't see it. And I ended up bouncing in and out of treatment, multiple states. I went to, Minnesota, Chicago. My family was more of the type that, and I love them, but they didn't know what to do with me. There are addicts in my family. My father was an addict. My mother's had her troubles with it over the years, but not to the extent that I went to. And so they didn't know what to do with me. And with legal trouble at a young age, they just kind of sent me to different places. And it never stuck because I didn't want to be there. I didn't think that I was an addict. I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm there for smoking pot or maybe taking pills here and there on the weekend. I didn't realize, I didn't see that there was an issue. I'm normal. I'm a kid. I like to experiment. I went into treatment when I was 20, and it was the first time where I kind of started to realize that there was an issue. And I ended up staying in treatment 4 months and doing this whole primary care, extended care, and then going down to Florida. It was my first real experience. It was 2008, 2009 when the Florida going down to Florida and getting sober was a big thing. And I had family in South Florida, so I was like, oh, okay, this could be good. My grandparents were down there half the year, so and it was helpful. But the minute I left the structured environment as a child, as a young adult, I went right back to where I was. I needed to stay longer if I wanted to stay sober, and that just wasn't where I was at that time. And as the years went on, I ended up going back out to a place in Chicago. I double dipped in a few places over the years, but I ended up going back out there, and it was the first time where I engaged in the issues that were really there. If there was depression, anxiety, drug addiction, alcoholism, when I pick up a drug or a drink, I can't stop until I'm stopped, or there's nowhere else to go and I'm in a jail cell, or, on my way back to a treatment center. I can't stop on my own. Physically, I can't put a drink or a drug down once I'm in it. And, I'll touch on this a little bit. When I was getting sober at that time, I was 23 years old, and I had about a year sober, but I wasn't fully engaged. I was just kind of like going with the motions. And Matt knows about this. We've discussed it. At 23 years old, I lost my dad to suicide. And my dad was, and I believe now, as a sober person who works a program, that if my father would have done those things and handled his mental health and his substance abuse issues that were lingering for his whole life, that he would still be here. My dad did die. He did die with a clean toxicology. So he was really struggling mentally. And I say that because it plays out so much in my story. Obviously, that was, we just had the 13th. It was just his 13th anniversary 2 weeks ago. But, I used and used after that. I couldn't grasp this whole, like, how could this happen to me? I played a victim for a long time, and I think some of it rightfully so, because I was so lost. I didn't understand what was going on. And it finally got to the point in my life where I had hurt so many people. My family didn't want anything to do with me. They stuck with me for as long as they possibly could. And my family is based, it's my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, my aunt, my dad's sister, and my aunt's 3 kids who were like siblings, or, to me. I'm an only child. So they were like, I grew up with them. And at a certain point, they couldn't, I stopped being invited to things. I would show up to certain things, and it was, or I would show up late. It was ugly. I am, and I'm very honest about it. My drug of choice was heroin and cocaine. So I wasn't really showing up anywhere looking good, acting like a normal person would. So, I ended up getting a lot of tough love. I got a lot of tough love, and it was until I got sober in 2019 that my family stepped up in a big way. And my aunt, Cole, I was on probation at the time, and this is a tough one for families. I can't imagine doing what she did, but she called my probation officer at the time, and I ended up going to jail for 3 months because of by that phone call. And I willingly turned myself in. I waved that white flag. And at the time, it was my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and my aunt, making that decision to call my probation officer, knowing what was going to happen. At that point, I've already been to jail twice before, not for 3 months. That was the longest I ever went. And I thank God every day now that they did that. I would have died. I was a lost soul. Everything I did was focused on using drugs and alcohol. Waking up in the morning, as I'm sure you guys know, like I couldn't even brush my teeth, take a shower without having to go and cop my fix just for the morning before I could even do anything. I didn't take care of myself. Nothing was a responsibility because I didn't have them. I didn't care. But when I finally realized like how bad it was at that point, I have a lengthy criminal record. Luckily, no felonies, but and that stuff happened for a reason. And my family did what they did because they wanted to save my life. And I was never mad about it. I was never upset that happened. I was upset going through it. 90 days in county jail was not an enjoyable experience. But what it did is it sat me down for 90 days, and it showed me like, okay, like here's the rest of your life. If you're lucky, if you keep using, this is the best case is that you'll end up sitting in jail, if you keep going. Worst case is that, a lot of people would say is that I would die. My worst case was not dying, but being out there and getting high and having to find means and ways to use every day. And fast forwarding now, almost God willing, in 3 weeks, I'll have 6 years. My family, I don't really know. It's a tough one. So like my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, my cousins, my in-laws, they're such a huge presence in my life now. At first, when I got out of jail, my family didn't trust me in their house. It was, they used COVID as a big excuse on why I couldn't use the bathroom in the house. But really, we all know why I wasn't allowed in the house. It wasn't because I didn't have a mask on me. It was because they didn't trust me, and rightfully so. And then, as time went on, my grandfather, who I always had like a weird, strained relationship with, he got really sick in 2021. And I was like going into my second year of sobriety, and he was diagnosed with leukemia. And I ended up being able to get back into my family. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed a year after being diagnosed, but I was able to be a sober grandson that last year. I got engaged, and he was there. He made we had a small family engagement party the night after we got engaged, my wife and I, and my grandfather he sat there in a wheelchair, and he was, with it, but like he was able to see his firstborn grandchild struggle with addiction and being in jail and treatment centers, to now being a man standing in front of him getting married. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to my wedding, but my aunt and I have like a beautiful relationship where she's like a parent to me. She's like kind of filled in that dad role. When I don't want to toot my own horn, but like I'm like a force in my family now. I'm a strong presence. We're a small gang. We are, where there's not a lot of us. But for somebody who was a black sheep, really, like I don't feel like that at all anymore. And it's because I had to put in the work. I had to respect boundaries. I had to, like when my family put up like the boundaries and limits with what they could and would not deal with. I had to respect that. I had to be patient. And for families out there, like the best thing for me was, I was like slowly let back into my family because I did so much damage. We've had the experience over the years where they would let me back in right away. Here you go, you're back in. And I would blow that up quick, not intentionally, but just because like I self-destruct. And when things would, I would start getting things back too quick, it would just go bad for me. And with this, it was really a slow process. I was able to start in getting involved in my family stuff. Like I said, I don't have siblings, so I have 3 cousins. I was involved in all their weddings, sober. I held my grandfather's hand and made amends to him as he's laying in the hospital bed and he passed. Like those are the beautiful things that I was able to do because they put those. They made me go slow. They held my hand in a way and said, "This is what we're going to do this time." And for me, that's what I needed, life since then has been crazy. My grandmother and I have a really tight relationship. This was a woman who was done with me at the end. Even when I first got sober, I think they were just so beat up. Like, how could this happen? Like everybody in my family's gone to college. I'm the first person to ever go to jail. So like I was on the outside looking in, and when I finally started to get it together, it was beautiful watching the whole transition and like people welcoming me back. But it took tough love for me, and it also it was tough. It was tough some days, but I built up a support through my 12-step fellowship, and I had a lot of people to lean on. When I first got out of jail, all I knew was could get to a meeting. I love sharing this story because it's more about like a spiritual thing. When I first got out of jail, it was February 9th or February 10th of 2020. It was like right before COVID, and I got my phone back, and it had 2 or 3% on it, and I had that decision right then and there. Like, who do I call? What do I do? Right? Like, I can call the bad people and go back to what I was doing. And I ended up calling somebody that I met in treatment a couple months before. And he was like, all right, he's like, where are you going to be living? And I was like, oh, I'm moving in with my girlfriend. I should have been grateful that I had a place to go, but I moved in with my girlfriend, which was a humbling thing to do. And he's like, all right, I'll be there at 5 o'clock, text me the address. And I started going to meetings, and I started like listening, and they told me to be patient. And they told me to trust and have faith. And I did. And all these things in my life started coming back. Slowly. It was literally the slowest process for me this time. You know, my first sober job was, and like I got a big ego, so like, you know, I'm boxing cigars for $7 an hour during COVID, hating every minute of it. But my sponsor kept saying like, this is what you got to do, and he's like, another job will come along. I ended up getting a job in treatment and another job in treatment, and working my way and working in a treatment center that I went through, that I'm an alumni of, and that whole time my family was watching, you know, because I wasn't doing it for them this time. I was doing it because I really wanted to be sober. And yeah, I was scared to go back to jail, but really, like, for addicts, the consequences don't fear. I don't fear the consequences. You know, going back to jail, I did it once, you know, then I did it twice. I can do it a third time, you know, I don't want to. And look, I have not been back since. But my family was observing this from the outside. They saw that I was consistent. I was showing up, that I was, you know, following through for me was a huge thing, sober or not, like actually like committing to something, showing up, following through. And that's what my family started seeing that I was doing. They're like, oh man, like he said he's going to be here at 5 o'clock. He's here at 4:45. You know, like I was just the little things I think they started to pick up on, and they started seeing like, oh wow, like he's doing well. And then like I started putting on some weight, you know, that newly sober weight, and they were like, okay, he's getting into it. And they started seeing my life blossom, and that's really, you know, where it is today. And you know, I can pick up my phone right now and call anybody in my family, and they'll answer, and they know that if they call me, I'll be there. But it took a lot, and I hurt them, you know, because as an addict, when I'm using, I don't think about the people that I'm hurting. I just think if I'm keeping to myself, I'm fine. I'm not hurting them because I'm leaving them alone. And I left them alone. Yeah, I try to stay away for like 7, 8 years, unless it was like a big holiday, and like I was like, maybe I should just pop my head in. But really, I was destroying a lot of these people on the inside. And I don't know what that's like. I haven't gone through that on my side, on my end. But, you know, to watch these people just specifically like my mom and my aunt, watch the tears of just like a fear. Like we didn't know what was going to happen. They expected the phone call. And the one thing I don't want to do to my family is, you know, they already had that one phone call with my dad when my dad was found. The last thing I want is for them to ever get that phone call on me. And now, you know, I have my own family, which is crazy. You know, being in jail 6 years ago, I have 2 small children. I'm married. Like that wasn't part of my plan. You know, my plan was to kind of like live in the city kind of guy and party and do that. And you know, my life has gotten to this point where, you know, I'm a sober dad. My mom says to me all the time, she's like, she's like, you couldn't have you couldn't be doing a better job. And because she sees me with my children, because she never thought she would see grandchildren. You know, she never thought I would live past 30. That's the truth. And her and I have had this conversation. And now she has a granddaughter that's almost 2 and a grandson that's almost 1. And she gets to watch it. And my grandmother gets to see her great grandchildren. She's a blessed woman. She's going to have her 6th great grandchild in the last 2 years soon, in the next like month or so. And like my family, are the cousins, the second cousins, all for a family who need hope, like it's possible. You know, I think it's just for me, what was best for me, and being this like, you know, crazy, you know, I don't want to say crazy, but like this deranged heroin cocaine addict. My family had to really set some stiff boundaries. And I had to be willing to put in the work to like kind of like unlock each level. You know, that's how it was, like not like a video game, but like kind of like, you know, I had to continue. I had to be consistent to get to, oh, he got a year sober. Oh, wow, he got engaged. Oh, wow, he got promoted at his job. Like, and then they started, the gates started opening more and more. And now there's no question, I am part of my family. I'm I like to think of myself as a centerpiece of my family. I don't know, I think that they would agree, like Halloween parties now is a ritual at my house for all the kids and the family members. And, but yeah, like I'm blessed because I might not have the biggest family, but I have my family and I have my wife's family. And they always say that it's not my wife's family, it's my family also. But everybody from my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, they've just been, you know, non-judgmental and just so warm, knowing that like I struggled and knew that one day we could get here, or at least I think they hoped. I don't know if anybody ever believed we'd get to this point, but and the last thing I'll really share is that, even sober, I had to go through a lot of difficulties. You know, my wife likes to say that it's my claim to fame, but at 4 years sober, I had brain surgery, and I had brain surgery last of March of 24, and I got through that process sober, with a 5-week-old daughter, and I had a craniotomy, and they removed a brain tumor. But the beautiful thing about my recovery is that I had people that held me up, you know. And I share that because, like, maybe a couple of days after I got out of the hospital, I went to a meeting I made my wife come with me, one because I couldn't see, I couldn't drive, and I wore a hat and sunglasses, and she sat with me in an open meeting just so I could be around other people because I was lost. I've never experienced anything like that. So, for anybody who does listen to this, like, no matter what we go through in life, like, you can stay sober through anything. I heard somebody in a meeting say to me, or after a meeting say to me one time, they're like, if that was an opportunity to use, that would have been, that brain surgery was it. And I was like, for what? To make it worse, to leave my daughter fatherless. At that time I didn't have a son. And, I made it through it. And it's another story. And it's a badge that I wear that I'm actually very proud of, to get through something like that sober and to come out on the other end and, been clear since. And now I'm just grateful to be a sober dad. So I think I spoke enough.
Wow.
Hopefully that was insightful.
It's an incredible story, just filled with so much hope and inspiration. I was like, I'm like a note taker. So I'm sitting here like taking notes, and
Yeah.
I have like a ton of questions, but one of the burning questions I have, you said it at the beginning. You said, you talked about how your family, like at the beginning of your journey, was forcing you in and out of, into treatment facilities, and you said,
Mhm.
you can't stop till I'm stopped. So there's like this message of, I was forced into a facility, so I stopped, but I was forced to stop. So when I came out, I used again, and then it starts that we have this saying, it's a long game played one day at a time. And then so like kind of like fast forward, and I hear this a lot, we can't stop until we want to stop, but yet I can't stop on my own. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like this, what's like a catch 22, like,
Mhm.
I can't stop till I'm stopped. I can't stop on my own. And so you have family members trying to force you to stop, but then on the other hand, I can't stop until I want to do it. So for us, for family members, we're always like, what is that switch, that aha moment? I don't know what you call it, where like for you, where you said, I'm going to stop, for me, but yet you to because you were, I thought I heard you say you were incarcerated. So that was like a
Mhm.
stop again.
Yeah. Um, wow. So yeah, so I learned over the years that I can't be forced into it. I'll go. You know what I mean? Like I'll go and I'll do what you want, but um I had to have that like willingness to like just
Mm,
experience this different way. And when I because my family really thought that like I think what I know in hindsight now is that my family was just trying to keep me safe at that time,
mm,
you know, because they knew I didn't have any other choice. So and like it was smart on their part to just get me somewhere that was safe. But my aha moment um, was really a um, it's an emotion. It was emotional time. It was right after Thanksgiving, right around Thanksgiving in 2019, and it was right before I went to jail. And I like came to on my apartment floor, and it was like an ugly scene. And my old dog who passed away about a year and a half ago was just like sitting by me when I came to. I came to on the kitchen floor, broken glass. It was an ugly scene. Um, and I sat up and I said, my first thought was, like I want to die. I wish I didn't make this trip. I wish that because whatever I was doing, kicked my butt because I don't remember anything. My phone was dead. And I said, I really wish that I would have died. And that was it. That was like that moment where I was just like, okay, like, and then I charged my phone. And I got that phone call from my probation officer. It was like 9:09. That it was like a Friday or whatever day it was. She's like, I need you to come up to, you know, um, the the probation office in that county. And I knew, and I was like, all right, I'm either gonna take my own life or I'm going to make sure somebody can take my dog because that was always my biggest excuse why I couldn't go back to treatment. My dog needs me. At that time, my dog was probably better off without me. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I just went. I waved that white flag, and I actually it was. And I'm not going to make this about like a God or a spiritual thing, but like I sat on myself and I prayed, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. I cried.
that sounds like a God thing to me.
Yeah, no, I don't like to make things about it because I know everybody has their different spiritualities and they call, their higher power, whatever they do.
Yeah.
And that's where I fully surrendered, but I hope that answered the question because it's more of like, I couldn't be forced because I wasn't ready. And the only times I stopped are when I was actually physically stopped by like the police, which happened quite a few times. And then as I got older, it wasn't until that moment where I was just like, I've had enough, you know, and like I knew what was coming. Like I willingly went to that probation office knowing that my violation was going to be between 30 and 90 days. And that's how set, like, I was so fed up with that life that I just did it. I took an Uber up there and that was it.
Wow.
And then, Billy, and when you were telling part of your story, man, and thank you so much for sharing, man. You have a powerful, powerful message, just as many of us do in on this journey. And man, I went back through my head and started thinking, did we run into each other in another state? Because your path, I mean, I saw May smiling, and I don't know if Matt remembers, but I was in St. Paul, and I always say this about St. Paul. They have the biggest and best sober community that you would ever
Yeah.
see. You know it because you were there.
Yeah.
I was in West Palm. I was in St. Paul. I felt like I was in band camp, traveling
Yeah.
the country trying to find the right community. But man, one of the things that you were like me, in my story, like many of us are, and you had to be beaten into submission. And that's what I heard. And during the time we're getting beaten into submission, our families are going through that phase of and especially for people like me and you that had multiple times coming in and out and getting a year, getting 6 months, getting 9 months, getting a year and a
Mhm.
half. and them hearing all the right things, and then they just see it just crumble back to nothing. And I a part of your story that stuck out to me, and this goes to, family members ask all the time, how do we know? How do we know that this is it? And I think the simplest answer to that is, not by what you're hearing me say, but by what you're watching me do. You made reference to the last time that, man, it was a grind getting back. I had to take this job, I had to move to this place, I had to do this a little bit before I got to here. And as I think that's an important piece that a lot of alcoholics, and then the families of alcohol, like, because what they want to do is, when we get 30 days out of treatment, get into the sober house, and then they want to come give us everything, and they want to give us a car, and they want to do this and that, and it lifts our level of normality, or whatever you want to call it, right back into where we were when we were using. And we don't get to go through that struggle period of being on the struggle bus of, man, you know what, creating a healthy life is really freaking hard. And a lot of alcoholics, we have to go through that in order to appreciate what we tore down, you know what I'm saying? But also, it's important for our families to see us go through those things, so that we're just not telling them, yeah, I made a meeting today, or yeah, I got a sponsor. Like, they're like, wow, he worked his way up from that nothing job to something that is meaningful to him. Now he's building on that. He has this relationship going over here. I see his friend group has changed. Like, it's not about what we're saying. It's about watching what we do over a period of time in order to get that. Yeah, I think that they've got it this time. And at least for today, and I think that that's a really huge piece that a lot of families miss. Don't listen to what I say, watch what I do,
Yeah. I completely agree. And that was the thing. Cause like I love to talk. I love to like kind of, I'm
We
always
can
out
sell
there.
water to a well, Billy.
Yeah, man. Like,
You know what
and
I'm
like,
saying?
I what I do for a living is really, I do a lot of talking. I do a lot of, interacting with people. And so I was always good at that, but, my family saw through that. My support saw when I was full of crap, they saw that. They knew it. And I didn't even realize that like I took a back seat when I first got sober. I didn't even realize that like I was just like, all right, like I'm just gonna live my life. I'm just gonna do what I gotta do and like pray that we come back together because I gotta be honest, when I first got sober, I didn't even know what it was like to have a family. I don't think I knew what it was like to have a family until now.
Mm.
Like these last few years of actually like being sober. And like I remember what it was like as a kid having like my dad, my parents were divorced, like having my mom and dad, my grandparents, my cousins, stuff like that. But I don't remember like I never cared what it was like to be a friend, a family member. I didn't know what it was like to be part of until I got sober. And now it's just like they not only do they know that like I'm sober, but like they know that I do well. They know that I live a good life because, like you said, because I've shown it consistently. And thank God that like it took years. Like I said, God willing, I'll have 6 years, December 1st. And I think for the first time, maybe in the last couple of months, a family member said to me, they're like, something was going on in my life. And they were like, or maybe it was around the surgery, but somebody said something like, I'm not even worried about you drinking or drugging, And I was just like, oh, whoa, we got to that point. Like you guys, they were more, they were concerned more about my mental well-being, not the drugs and the alcohol, which was like a huge shift. But yeah, like I'm as an addict, like I'm full of crap, like, and I will tell you all day long these great things, but there's no evidence to back it up, And now I have all this. I don't like call it evidence, but like here's all this like history of success, and like I said, success is just staying sober a day at a time. It's not about the job. It's not about it's not about any of the material stuff. It's about the relationships. It's about the consistency of those relationships. Like my family knows my friends, like because they're consistent. They show up because they're sober. Like everybody in my life is positive. I don't involve any of the negative. I've tried that, bringing some old friends in, not saying that they're not good people, but I can't go that route again, because I will get sucked back into, even if it's not the drugs and alcohol, I get sucked up into just the negativity, and I don't like being that. I don't like being a negative person. So yeah, it's about the action. It's always about action.
Yeah, you sort of circle back to the mental health aspect, which is what I wanted to bring up because you mentioned in your story, it wasn't until you went to treatment 3, 5, 10 times or whatever that you actually started working on your issues. And then, also like your dad's story about he had a history of substance abuse, but he ended up killing himself, not due to any drugs or alcohol at the time, but just because of like his mental state, right? And
Mhm.
um, I always talk about how important that is. Like, they're so intertwined, and just because you're sober doesn't mean you're doing good, right? And I think
Sure.
that's its own battle, maybe even harder for some people after, like that's where some of the real work can happen. But do you mind just touching on like what some of those underlying issues were for you that you kind of came to discover about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so when I got sober this time, I always knew that there was underlying trauma. Like I grew up in a chaotic household. Two parents with substance abuse issues, both with their own mental health issues. So I grew up with a lot of not physical violence, but like emotional. I saw a lot of, you know, um, you know, battling between my parents, to say nicely. So I didn't understand how that stuff was going to affect. We don't know how it's going to affect us later, and the trauma for my dad and the trauma for my addiction. I never grew up. Like I never had that transition from a child to like a teenager to an adult. So there was like I needed to learn, but I couldn't because I was held back from this trauma of like all the things that happened over those years. And really the underlying stuff came from, it was a lot of fear, self-hatred, self-worth, um, and and like you said, it's not just that stuff doesn't just get cleared up once I got sober. It took time for me to even acknowledge that those were things that were there. My they say for addicts we're egomaniacs with inferiority complexes. Like I was just I was I didn't like myself. I didn't fit in. Like, so there was so many different components to that. And um, you know, I wasn't like I didn't I would the anger, the rage. Again, like I don't blame anything on my parents, but like my dad was a very rageful, angry guy at the time. So I saw that and I took those traits on. Those are some of the traits that stuck with me. And those were really the underlying things. It was anxiety, it was self-hatred, it was the self-worth, and it was just this like ultimate fear of everything. Like it's I don't know, maybe addicts and alcoholics do understand that when I just say it. It's just fear based. Like everything in my life was just, I was scared. I was a child that just kept getting older, and then finally here I am, 30 years old, 31 years old, getting out of jail. And I'm got to figure out how to do it. I felt like I had to like learn how to breathe, how to eat, like a normal person. It was crazy, you know? So those were really the underlying things that came out and that I've been able to work through, but it took years. And it's crazy to say that, but really the first couple of years I was still twisted up. I still had like a distorted mindset, where I thought that like, the world owed me something. And it took a lot of, I had to give myself, and that's like my own, like, I love to say that is that like, we need to give ourselves time once we put down the drink and the drug. People have to see that like there's other stuff going on, and then we could deal with those issues, and then it's less likely that the substance abuse comes back in, at least in my experience. So
Billy, I'm curious how long, I was trying to do the math, but I'll just ask you.
yeah.
How long was your journey from use to getting sober? Like what was that? How many years?
um 13 for 13 or 14 years till I got sober. And that was yeah, that was in and out of 9 treatment centers, handful of detoxes, stuff like that, jails a couple times. And yeah, so yeah, it was a long journey, and it started out with like, experimenting, you know,
Yeah.
smoking pot, drinking, um, and it led me to what I ended up finding, which was what you know, talk about an aha moment. When I found my combination, that was my aha moment.
So how did your family during that time? So I know at the beginning, it sounds like they were like really involved, trying to get you to treatment centers, forcing you into them. And then as you were sharing your story, it felt like at some point they started pulling away from you. And as they started pulling away, and you used the term, they start setting boundaries. Um, how would you describe, because I think this is really important for family members to hear this distinction. Um, how would you describe their, um, I want to say like the atmosphere? Like one of the things Tony shares with his family is like that they loved in a different way. Like, and when I hear that, I hear he still knew that they loved him, even though they set boundaries, even, they loved him in a different way.
That's really, they loved me, but they loved me in a different way. Um, and to answer the first part, like when I first saw that they set their boundary, I was on my second journey back from Center City, Minnesota, and I went to like a aftercare program in Pennsylvania, and they wouldn't visit me.
Wow.
And it was like a 3-hour trip from where my dad lived in Jersey to where I was at that place. Um, and he said, no. I said, I'm here for 90 days. He's like, I'm not coming. And obviously that hits different now because he's gone. And but that was that was my doing, and my mom was always around, and she would always come and visit. She would always do that. But and like I love my mom, but part of my story is that my mom was an enabler to my addiction. That's something that a lot of people don't talk about. And my mom and I, we talk about that now, but and that was her struggles. But like people, so she enabled in a lot of ways, even when I was trying to get better. But
Can you hear a little bit like what do you mean she enabled, for those who, because we get called that a lot, like, we're in.
yeah, so and this is just the truth. Like my mom's generation, I guess, they were more accepting of like, smoking pot and drinking, and as long as you do it at the house and you don't go out, what trouble can you get into? Well, that was not true because the cops were still always coming to my house. But it was more of that. It was she allowed me to do it and justified it her way. If it was me staying at home and doing it, and then my house kind of becoming a party house when I was in like high school, more of like yeah, and then over the years when I would try to get sober, I could easily manipulate my mom to like letting her look the other way, knowing that like I'm in a point in my life where I should probably be getting sober, but like, I think she just wanted to see any happiness in me, and she saw the slightest when I would smoke pot or do whatever it was at that time. Um, so yeah, and financially, my family on my mom and my, both sides, they financially enabled a lot of the time. Not knowing what I was doing, but um, and again, I manipulated it to like the point where like I was, trying to come up with any excuse to get means and ways. But and again, I think enabling is also allowing like, there's a thin line of like sticking with the addict going through their addiction, and like where do we say no, like you can't come to this event, no you can't do this, but like we also want you to know that we love you, and but we don't want to enable you. There's like a really thin line there, and I think it's and for everybody it's different, but it's knowing that like, you know we can't, we love you, but we can't involve you, even though that it hurts. we can't have you around. Like it's too tough for us to watch this, you know? And we don't see that as the addict. I didn't see that. So, but yeah, the enabling thing was big. And it sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's with the substance, sometimes it's just not encouraging the person to go to treatment or better themselves and just kind of pushing it aside. Like, oh, well, it's just a phase. They'll get better. Like if you're noticing that they have a problem, like probably not going to get any better. At least for me, it didn't get any better. It got worse quickly. So was there a second part to that question?
Well, yeah. So
Sorry, I go off quick.
no, it's great. So helpful. So what was the atmosphere then? Like the essence of your family dynamics?
There really wasn't. Um, you know, I remember being in treatment in 2008 or 9, and like my grandmother would write me letters, just like positive, like, we hope you get it, this and that. And my dad would always answer my calls. My mom would always answer my calls. They would come up and visit, when I was in the treatment center, it's like a long term in Pennsylvania. But really, there was no dynamic because I wasn't around. And when my family was together the most was usually during the summer. And for some reason, my addiction loves to send me to treatment. Like I gets really bad before summer, so I go away. So the thing is there wasn't my dynamic with my family was if I needed them to go to treatment, they were there.
Okay.
If I wanted to do my thing, I kept my distance because I would create a scene, and they didn't want that anymore. And not even a scene. It was just like it was sad. Because like now in hindsight, like what they saw in me then is what I've become now, which was potential to be a happy and healthy sober person. And to see this young person just going through this, I think they just had to they kind of sat me in a corner. So it was just it was negative, the dynamic. Everything was negative. So that's like the best way I can describe it. The dynamic was hectic, unhealthy, and negative. My doing, my behavior obviously got to that point, is what got everybody to that point.
And yet there was a part of you that knew when you needed help to get sober that they would be there. I think.
Always.
Okay.
Always. If I, even after my dad passed, because my dad was more of like that, he was a savior. So when I was struggling, he would swoop in like Superman, I always described. And then when I would get sober, he would kind of back off. I don't know if that was his own struggle, thinking that I didn't need him, even though I needed him more then. But I knew that even after he passed, if I would have called my grandparents or my mom or my aunt and said, I need to go to treatment, which I did, they would support me in any way they could, even if that was just making sure that my insurance was paid, so I could get into a treatment center, and would always help in any way possible, as long as it was something positive, nothing with finance, nothing with money, but if it was just like, hey, I'm in a sober house, I just want to see you for dinner, like any of that stuff, they always supported it. They always supported me in seeing me. As long as there was something positive going on. If there was nothing positive going on, there was no real support.
Is there an enabling aspect to that too? Like, hey, I know that I can go get high, and whenever I feel like coming up for air or pulling the ripcord, like I can give my mom a call and I know I'm going to get into treatment. Like, is there an aspect of that like can help kind of perpetuate your addiction as well because you know there's a way out at the end?
It's I wish that there was a term different than enabling for that, but like because that's its own thing, and like it's a great point because yeah, I always knew that yeah, I could pull the ripcord, they would be there to save me. But it's hard because like you don't want to ever take that away from somebody knowing that that's there. You just like pray and hope that they eventually grab for that cord and say, hey, like I need you. But my family, they wouldn't show up physically. They would just help arrange it, and then I'm gone. You know what I mean? So Yeah. So that's a tough one because it's like a positive. I don't want to say a positive enabling, but like in a way, it's like this little thing in the cabinet. It's like, all right, like if I need them just to go to rehab and I'm all out of money and I got nowhere to go and I got nothing left. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's a great question, Matt. And Billy, I want to piggyback a minute on what you're saying because and I have something stark in my story that it it shows that immensely. I because it becomes in its own way it becomes, and I'm sure it's probably worse in this generation. This was 10, 15, 20 years ago I'm talking about, but knowing that you're going to a great place that makes great meals, 3 meals a day. You're
yeah,
gonna be There's gonna be some guys there. You might meet some new homeboys. There's gonna be some girls there. You might get a girlfriend. Like you are going to these places that you're just like, you know what? Mom and dad are footing the bill, or their insurance is still covering me, so I know I'm gonna be okay. Now, what happened to me was that along the way, there were also those state-run facilities that we all heard about and knew about, right? And I had the opportunity to go to go to one of those, and
mm,
it was like a Salvation Army type thing, and it was a completely different stay. Okay.
yeah,
And when I got out of there, I think that was one of the first times that I stayed sober for because there was a guy who ran the ones that were like over in good neighborhoods and like were kind of upper class, and then
mhm,
there was his partner, his old partner. He was over on the other side of town, so to say. So like I went to one of those one time, and I was like, I'm not going over there again because
mhm.
you know what I mean, like.
I do.
But it the darker our consequences get when we come back, the easier it is and the more we want to put into staying sober. And sometimes it happens through jails, it happens through prison for me as well.
Mhm,
But when you're not going to that, when that family says, hey, you know what, and I heard you say, your dad said, I'm not coming to see you this time. That reminded me of my dad, when I was at STR in 2014. There was a family weekend. He came up by himself. He didn't have mom with him. He didn't have brother with him. And he told me, he said, son, let me tell you something. He said, I take care of a lot of people. He said, one of them is your mother. She's my girlfriend. She
mm,
said, I help your brother out. She said, I help uncles and aunts out that you don't even know about. He said, I have other people in my life to worry about besides you. And when he told me that, he said, now you're my son and I'm always gonna love you. And I'm here for you if you're doing the right thing. But he said, this SHIT stuff that you keep
mhm,
pulling, he said, it is not gonna be accepted anymore. So you want to
yeah,
go live this type of life, you go far away from me and you do it, so to say. And just hearing that type of those are those boundaries that we're talking about as to I'm always going to love you, but damn it, if you keep living like you're living, it's going to look a completely different way. And I'm not so sure you're going to like it. And,
yeah,
and as addicts and alcoholics, we need to hear that in order to bring about a more rigorous program and a more rigorous try at staying sober for a longer period of time. It's very important, you know.
yeah. Absolutely. And that's and so I know what it's like at those high places where we would go the nice treatment centers, and like I said, where I ended up getting sober, I needed that. And some people, some family members, like, no, I don't. Like, I don't want my child or my grandson or my granddaughter to go through that. But like, unfortunately, fortunately, some of us need that.
Yeah.
Like I needed to get beat down, beaten a submission, as you said. Like I needed to see how it was when nobody was there to
Mm.
get me out of it. And like, here, do your thing. This is what you asked for. Like,
Mm.
and I might not have directly said I want to go to jail, but by my actions and my behavior got me in those consequences, and I had to sit through it. You know, and they were like, "All right, do your thing, and when you get out, let us know." But and even then, my family got like, and it was a probation violation, and they got me a lawyer so that I wouldn't do more time. So like even then at the end, at the end of my not knowing what was going to happen, they were like, "All right, you're going to jail," but like, we'll still help. you know, still put money on your books. You know what I mean? And they did. But I had to get to that place where I had no choice. I was just a number in there, you know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and Tony, just to
So,
like hammer home that point, like my dad, I think had a very similar conversation with me, and that this was my first time in treatment, right? Because I remember one of the like I'm sitting in there, I just got my phone back, calling family members, and I'm asking my parents like, who does Uncle so and so know that I'm in here? Does Grandma know? I'm trying to get a
Mhm.
sense of like what I'm dealing with, right? Because I'm dealing with the shame and the,
Mhm.
am I gonna have to answer questions when I get out of here? What's the family gonna think of me? Um, and the first thing he said was like, "Yeah, my brothers know, but I'm not telling your nana because it might kill her." Honestly, like she was like 97 at the time or something. Um, but the other thing he said is like, your family all supports you now, but if you don't take this seriously and you have to do this a couple more times, I don't know that they're gonna be the same level of supportive. And I don't know if that was just like an offhanded comment that he made, if he meant for that to stick with me almost 5 years later. But like that just like really, hit home, I think, because it was like, man, I have this opportunity here where people are supporting me and I have the ability not to get out of this with a bunch of people disappointed. If anything, they're proud of me, but I can turn that very quickly if I don't take this seriously. And I think that was a big turning point for me in that early treatment process.
yeah, we need to hear that stuff. You know, like you needed to know, like, because each time that I would go in and out of treatment, like that level of, I don't want to say support, but like that level of like, we're here, we got your back, would drop. You know, each time I showed them that like I wasn't ready to do it, you know, they would step back further and further until said nobody would even, no, I didn't have anybody even come visit me on visiting days and weekends in rehab, you know, and nobody came to see me in jail. That wasn't happening. You know, that's too, you got yourself in there. We'll see when you get out. You know, nobody was coming, and that was okay.
It it takes, and I'll say this from my own experience as well as from um, the families that I've worked with and walked alongside as they've been trying to support someone. It can be extremely exhausting.
Hmm.
Um, and just mentally, emotionally, physically, because there is that constant worry of what, we're constantly playing the worst case scenario through
Yeah,
our minds. And so, yeah, call me enabler, but I would rather see you in a treatment facility
yeah,
than out there using and struggling. So if my loved one comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to go," yeah, I'm gonna, by all means possible, try to get you into a treatment facility and just hope and pray that you'll hear something, see something, something within you will, have that moment of clarity, even just for a moment of clarity, that you'll want to do it for yourself. I always use the analogy that, you can't force somebody to change. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But I tell family members, but if you feed them enough salty crackers, they may want to take a drink. So for me, going into treatment, that's a salty cracker. You might hear something, see, so I'm going to encourage family members, just feed them as many salty crackers as possible. And again, for me, the enabling comes down to, is my action um, contributing to your continued use, or is my action contributing to your well-being and your, steps toward recovery?
the,
And that's kind of how I like to put enabling in those two buckets, and for families to kind of use that as, hey, is this because what should I give them money? Should I not give them money? Well, is it going to contribute to him or her going out and buying drugs, or is it going to contribute to them getting something to eat. Like it just, um, so in wrapping up, we said we were going to try to keep these a little bit shorter. But it's just such a rich discussion, and I could keep this one going on and on. I feel like we need a part two for this one. But just in closing, I'd like to hear from each of you, what would you say to family members who are afraid to set boundaries or afraid to let go? So,
Yeah, for me, those those two things. One is for the alcoholic and the addict, and one is for the loved one. The boundaries, that's for the loved one. You guys need to set boundaries in order to protect yourself from the person who you're involved with. Because if you're an alcoholic or an addict like me, you put chemicals in my body and I become dangerous. I become dangerous. Uh, I wasn't so much on the physical side, but emotionally, physically, I can become dangerous in a lot of different ways. And you guys have a right to protect yourselves along the journey as we are going in and out. You have a right to protect yourselves while still loving and caring and being concerned. The letting go part is for us.
mm,
You guys, when we come in and we even during our process of getting in trouble, and you heard Billy tonight talk about the consequences. You got to let us go, and we need those consequences. I needed to sit in a prison cell. I needed every day I served in county jails the times before. I needed those nights on the street where the door was locked and I had nowhere to go. And then when we get sober, you have to let us go in order for us to heal, because you can't fix us. Another alcoholic and addict can. The medicine, the medication comes between two alcoholics and addicts. And if you're a loved one and you're not an alcoholic or in sobriety yourself, you'll never be able to help me stay sober in the way that the people of the program can. So the letting go is for us, and the boundaries are for you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, something has to change. Like whatever's going on is not it's not working, obviously. Like your loved one, whoever it is, your spouse, your kid, like they're stuck in this cycle and you're stuck in this cycle with them too, right? And I think that the family member's journey parallels the addict's journey so much in that like change is hard for everybody, right? And it's hard to change the way I have a relationship with someone just as much as it is for me as the alcoholic to change the relationship that I have with like alcohol, or drugs, or it's like inconceivable that hey, I can distance myself from this person and actually feel better. The same way as like if you told me 6 years ago that I could stop drinking and like actually be happier and figure out how to live my life in a better way, like I would have thought you're crazy, right? It's like this is the thing that I need. Like this is the only thing that's like getting me through and giving me hope, right? But like having worked with so many families like we have, I think we can all say that like when people do get to that point where they realize like this is hurting me so deeply that like I need to do something different. Like Tony said, to protect myself. It's like when you finally let go and you can sort of maintain those boundaries and realize that you can't control the situation, it's like you can start to find that peace and like some of those sleepless nights go away and that anxiety of like what's this person doing and what do I need to do? Like it all just kind of like you can see it in the person like when that starts to happen. And I know it's hard to wrap your head around that, but like just, remember that the same way Tony said his dad was like, "Hey, I have other people in my life that I need to take care of. It's not just you." Like you are one of those people. Tony's dad is one of those people that he has to take care of. So kind of, do what you need to do so you can ultimately be a little bit happier or healthier.
Yeah. So what I've learned is that this is a family disease.
mm,
It's not just the addict and alcoholic like we've been talking about. It's everybody that's affected by it. And um, I'm just basically just repeating what the other two said. It's just that they have to really take care of themselves. And I love what Tony said. His dad's it's perfect. I got other people, man. I got to take care of me. And I don't know what that's like. I can't imagine. And God willing, I'll never have to deal with it. But we have the family members have to really look at themselves and say, okay, like I still need to live. I still need to function. I know that they're out there doing that, and it breaks my heart. And when they're ready, I'm here. But I need to get up. I need to drink my coffee. I need to get to work, and I need to focus on my well being because I just know that having friends that have gone back out to create like how I want to try to control and jump in and get them to and do all that stuff like being a family member that's like on a not but it's a different level of love, it's a different level of care, and setting that boundary of saying okay, and like I said, I'm just repeating now, I am here when you are ready, but until then I gotta take care of me. I gotta take care of our family. I gotta take care of the dog. I gotta make sure that I'm still out there and being who I am, but I'm here, and sometimes families gotta let go. In my situation, it was a blessing. I survived it, and I'm still here. But I can't imagine. There's fear there. It's all fear. It's like I don't want to let them go too far and then not be able to get them back. Um, but like Tony said, there's the only person that can really help the alcoholic and the addict is another alcoholic and addict once they get it, once they get the substances out of their system. Family's great and support, but if you don't know, you don't know. If you've never been through it, it's a tough thing to comprehend. So I know like my wife is not in recovery, and when I go through when I've gone through some of my stuff in early sobriety, she just doesn't get it. She can read all the books she wants. She just doesn't. She doesn't understand what I'm going through, and that's I feel like a lot of the families. But any advice for the family is take care of yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. Be right, because if you're not, there's no way. Like in my experience with my dad, he wasn't healthy to deal with me being unhealthy, so it just always went off the rails. So like always have families just taking care of you, so that when that person does come around, you are going to be the best fit. You're going to be the best support you can be for them. So.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great space to stop. Thank you all so much. You do give us so much hope. All of your stories are just so incredible, and just the courage and the wisdom and the insight. I think I shared this quote a couple of episodes ago, but I love it. I keep it next to me all the time. To know the road ahead, ask those coming back. And thank you so much for, as you have come back and just given wisdom and insight to those who are still walking this path and going forward. Appreciate all of you. Billy, special thankful to you, and appreciate you coming on, and we definitely will need to do a part two with you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks,
It's an honor, to be to talk with you guys and try to help families.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.